Representatives. And I come to the floor this morning, Mr. Speaker, to address a topic, and most of the words that I say will be from an article written by Roger Scruton, who is an author from Great Britain, and he's commenting on a new book by Douglas Murray titled Madness of Crowds, Gender, Race, and Identity. And some of this hits so much home, and it has so much to do with America, I thought it was important that I address this here this morning. But he says, in every period of history, there have been opinions and customs that are dangerous to question. But our situation in Western democracies today is a new one and a novel one. The old customs have been torn asunder by a culture of repudiation which encourages people to shape their lives according to an identity of their own, and that socialization no longer means what it used to mean. It means now becoming who you are without regard to the framework that existed in the civilization and the culture prior. And so the punishments for saying, thinking, or implying the wrong thing are real, serious, largely impossible to deflect. That means that the archive of your crimes is stored in cyberspace. And however much you may have confessed to them and sworn to the change, they will pursue you for the rest of your life, just as long as someone has an interest in drawing attention to them. And when the mob turns on you, it is with a pitiless intensity that bears no relation to the objective seriousness of your fault. A word out of place, a hasty judgment, a slip of the tongue, whatever the, quote, fault might be, it is sufficient, once picked upon, to put you beyond the pale of human sympathy. And so this is reflected in the book, The Madness of Crowds. But the emerging world of censorship is a world without forgiveness, and in which the real virtues and vices that govern our conduct are ignored altogether or are decided to be irrelevant. The crimes for which we are judged are existential crimes. Through speaking in the wrong way, you display one of the phobias or isms, or they presume that is the case, that show you to be beyond acceptable humanity. You are now a homophobe, an Islamophobe, a white supremacist, or a racist, and no argument can refute these accusations once they have been made. And even your accusers are not interested in your deeds, they are interested in you. And what they're interested in is whether or not you are one of us, meaning actually one of them. Your faults cannot be overcome by voluntary action since they adhere to the kind of thing that you are, and you reveal what you are in the words that define you as defined by your critics. These words may be taken out of context, even doctored to mean the opposite of what you said. That's true with the author, and it's certainly true with me. But this will not affect the verdict, since there is no objective trial, there's no case for the defense, there's no due process. You are accused by the mob, examined by the mob, condemned by the mob, and as if you'd brought it upon yourself, and then they say you only have yourself to blame. For the mob is by nature innocent. It washes its own conscience in a flow of collective indignation, and by joining it, you make yourself safe, which is one of the reasons why we see an epidemic of virtue signaling here in this Congress, Mr. Speaker. The spirit of the mob has entered not only the language of public debate, but also the sources of information and the institutions of decision-making. Censorship begins in the media themselves. Cyberspace is censored, and it is controlled by about 4 major companies. George Orwell predicted this, but I think it has eclipsed even his magnificent imagination in the reality that we're dealing with today. But the author Murray gives riveting examples of the way in which, I'll use this example, whiteness has become a moral fault in the eyes of identity warriors on the American campus. They now condemn people openly for the color of their skin, provided that it's white. The art of taking offense. Whole sections of the university curriculum are devoted to explaining to students that words, arguments, comparisons, even questions, rhetorical or not, are, quote, offensive, regardless of the intention with which they are used, or actually the language, the precise definition of the language. So invariably, the offense is given by the old majority, culture and taken on behalf of some privileged minority. Mr. Speaker, this is a shorthand version of what's going on in this country, what's going on in this Congress, what's going on in the media. And I submit this, that we don't have any longer an objective news media. That center that used to be the truth has been completely vacated, almost completely vacated. Much of it's gone to the left, some has gone to the right, and that piece of being able to pick up a newspaper and read it and believe that it's true today is no longer true today, and the American civilization must come to grips with this and go to original sources, come to our own conclusions, adjust our civilization and our culture. If we fail to do so, we will be pitted against each other for a long time to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate your attention. I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Rush, for 5 minutes.